Introducing the table miter saw. This primitive wooden prototype combines a table saw and a miter saw in one tool. It weighs 61 pounds. It's 32 inches long, 28.5 inches wide, and 14 1/4 inches tall. The blade height is 2 inches. The maximum rip capacity is 12 inches. It will miter a 2x6 either way, and the maximum crosscut is 8.5 inches. With special setups, you can increase the crosscut to 15 inches, and you can do joinery like tenons. Here is where the table saw fence slides, the rail that it slides on, that's the table saw fence. It's a rail firmly mounted to the table, so it helps avoid alignment issues. Here we are using this tool as a table saw to rip a 2x4 in half. Boom. There we are. The fence clamps onto the rail. The rip fence clamps onto the rail with that bar clamp. And it's a very, very simplistic rip fence. The mechanism for the table saw is mounted on a trolley inside there. It's actually borrowed from a cheap old saw. So the trolley slides back and forth on the saw. You unlock it with this bolt on the side, and then the table saw mechanism actually slides back and forth on the tool. To make miter and cross cuts, you need this fence. It's a miter and cross cut fence. On one side, it has this sliding drawer mechanism that receives a pin. And then on the center under it, it has this trunnion that receives a little trunnion plate that allows the whole thing to make miter adjustments. Now the trunnion plate mounts, it's got a pin that goes through the whole thing that clamps it down in the middle, and it's got 2 alignment pins on each side, so there it goes, the trunnion plate. And then over on the side is where the drawer pin goes. To adjust the miter, you unlock this knob on the front, and that allows the whole thing to swivel on a center pin and like some skateboard wheels. So there's a side table that moves back and forth on that drawer pin on the side. It's activated by a little system of gears. So as you spin the thing, this little side table slides back and forth. Now this is the whole thing moving in unison, and there you can see the pin going down into the trunnion plate, and it moves back and forth as the thing adjusts its miter. When you clamp down on that little pin that's moving back and forth there, then that'll lock it down pretty well. Now on the side, you can see the pin that goes into the little drawer mechanism that attaches to that side table. When you adjust it side to side, the little side table moves forward and back, and that works with the little drawer mechanism and the little pin, which adjusts the miter. Now there's a system of gears along the side there, and we're going to show you that. The whole thing swivels on some skateboard wheels and a center pin. There's a big gear that's a bevel gear that goes to a system of compound gears that steps up the movement just a little bit, not too much, and goes to a rack and pinion gear, and then that adjusts the whole thing. On the miter saw side, there's another switch. It's just a push button switch that activates the blade. The tabletop is, the trolley is not mounted at the top, it's mounted to the sides. The top is actually really flimsy thin plywood. Here we are, we're going to make a 90-degree cross cut on a 2x4, boom, slide it over, and then slice another little piece off, boom. There you have it. Okay, now, here is the maximum amount you can slide and cut. 2 2x4s and the offcut piece actually from before. Let's measure that, and we get 8.5. So that's 8.5 inch capacity on 2x lumber right there. You're going to use the push stick on this. It actually will cut more. We'll show you that later in the video. But boom, there you go. It cuts it. This is the maximum rip capacity of this tool. It's obviously affected by how wide the tabletop is. But if we measure that, you can see that black mark right there, that's 12 inches. So it'll rip 12 inches. Now, you can actually raise the blade through a workpiece and then slide it forward, or just lower the blade a little bit. Here I have a 10-inch wide piece of 3/8 plywood, and it won't fit in there, it won't fit in that 8.5 inches, but I can lower the blade and just raise it through it. You lower the blade just a little bit and you can get what you need. And there we cut the 10-inch wide piece of plywood. I did have to clamp it down because the table saw mechanism only works from one side to raise and lower the blade. Here's a 3/4 inch piece of plywood that's even bigger. I had to let the blade all the way down so that it can just plunge right through there. You can see we could have got just a little bit more. We cut that, and that's a really wide piece there. So how wide is that? Well, we'll measure it, and you can see it's 15 3/4 inches. Although maybe could have gotten to 16, it was just a little bit short. This is a very primitive wooden prototype, and here we are making a miter cut with on a 2x6 with the machine pivoted to the right, and voila, that's just a normal 2x6. And of course the machine with its little trunnion and everything will pivot to the other side, just like so. And there's our miter cut and our flimsy table. Now, to make bevel cuts, you got to tip the blade. Well, the mechanism that I got is from an $139 Delta table saw I bought from the Home Depot in the year 2000. So it's just one of those cheap mechanisms. It's got the normal switch, normal ability to raise and lower the blade, and I broke the little lever that adjusts the bevel. So I got a little metal clamp there, and you use a wrench to just loosen just a regular old nut, and then you can adjust the bevel. Of course it only tips one way because most table saws on that range do, but you can raise and lower the blade as much as you like with it tipped to a full 45. And of course the machine will miter 45 either way, actually a little over 45. So here we are doing a compound miter on more of that 2x6. Compound miter cut, just like so, and boom. And there you have it. That'd be the only way you could do crown molding on this particular prototype because the blade height. So the dust collection on this tool is the same as a cheap table saw. It just falls out the bottom. Although I only have holes in half of the bottom of the base for it to fall out of. Because I didn't want to put holes in the big gear that the whole thing activates with. In later videos I'll show you. Now this is another cool thing this tool does. I've got a couple 2x6s mounted on the front of the fence there, of the crosscut fence. This allows us to do tenoning and other woodworking joints. I've got an incredibly simple tenoning jig for this saw. This is the simplest tenoning jig you have ever seen. There's no sleds, there's no all that complicated stuff. It's just two boards screwed together at a square and then another piece of plywood to help you clamp it. And it's just square with a little piece of 2x lumber. And there you go. You just clamp your 2x4 on there, or whatever it is you're putting a tenon on. You're going to adjust that blade height to, however deep you want it. Ta-da. And boom. You can make your tenon cut. You have to put that extra boards in front of the fence because when you lower the blade, they might have trouble getting all the way through the board. There's our two, I think those are called cheap cuts. And now we're going to finish off the tenon. We're going to readjust the blade height to finish off the tenon. And this one did move on me. I didn't clamp it well on one of the sides, so one of the sides is bigger than the other. But still, you can see what you can do with this tool. It's really easy. You don't need to build a table saw sled. There's so much you can do so quickly and easily. And boom. A very crude tenon.